True story. Um, we received a great group of people into the church last week when the bishop was here at the 4 p.m. service. One of them is up in the choir, Ron Richardson. Ron came from the Lutheran church, and he said one request since we came here is that we would sing for all the saints 8 verses, all 8 verses in one shot. So we compromised on 2 this year, Ron, and so maybe each year you're here, we'll add another verse or 2. We'll get to 8 eventually for you, but it's been his only request for hymns. Lutherans love hymns. It's been 8 verse for all the saints. So who knows? We may see it one of these days. Jesus and Zacchaeus is a bit of a famous Bible story. If for those of you that might have heard it before, it's kind of a Sunday school classic. When we tell kids about Jesus seeing Zacchaeus up in the tree. What I want to do today is tell a little bit of backstory on Zacchaeus, and then maybe that'll help us see the story a little bit differently, and then offer some reflection for us on how we can be like Jesus, some ways the story can help us be like Jesus in our everyday life. So Zacchaeus, the Bible gives us all the bio that the Bible feels it needs to give us on Zacchaeus. He is a chief tax collector, and he's rich. That should tell you, if you're in their time, exactly everything you need to know about Zacchaeus. For us, maybe a little translation might be helpful and necessary. Zacchaeus is in charge of tax collecting over Jericho. And there were a couple ways Rome would do tax collecting, because here's one thing that does unite us over time and space, across cultures and ages, is no one has ever liked paying taxes. Right? So they would have to come up with creative ways to collect taxes. And this is what Rome found out. When we come over and conquer a country and take it over, they don't really like paying taxes to us. So they hide money and they find ways to do it, and we can't really get the taxes we need. They need, to fund the army and all the things like that, from Rome's perspective. So what they would do is they would put the tax collection out to bid, so that someone who was entrepreneurial and could figure out how to make some money Rome would say, Cameron County, we need $5 million in taxes from Cameron County this year. And so someone would say, let me put the contract in, I can get that money to you in 10 months. And so they would win the contract, and then they would provide Rome the money. And the idea is they would have the Roman support then to collect it from everyone else. And so a tax collector could make money a lot of ways. One is through efficiently collecting the taxes with a little extra. One was, and they would do this because they had cash on hand, right? There's not banks and credit unions in this time. Because tax collectors would have cash on hand, they would kind of open like a payday loan type business on the side, because they had the reserves to be able to do it. So they would do that for high interest. Lots of ways that they would recoup that. So somebody might say, I'll bid on that. Somebody like Zacchaeus would say, I'll bid on that. Rome, you will get $5 million from me, because I know I can collect $8 million from them. And then Rome said, we get our money, it's not our problem, and we know guys like Zacchaeus are going to get their money because now it's their money. Right? Greed is going to motivate them, and they're part of the community, so they know where you hide your money because they know the places. Right? Somebody coming from Italy and Rome is not going to know where you hide your money in Jericho, but someone from Jericho will. So that was the Roman system. Here's the thing. Tax collectors made lots of money. Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, which means he was in charge of all of Jericho. He probably was the one who put the bid in and oversaw the whole thing, and he was rich, which means he made lots of extra money doing it. We can assume how he made that extra money, right? Maybe overcharging, maybe high-interest loans, all of the above. The challenge with being a tax collector is everyone hated you. Now, you made lots of money, but everyone hated you, because it's bad enough that Rome conquered us and wanted our taxes. But Rome conquered us, wanted our taxes, and one of our own people stood up and said, I'll help you get them. It was a combination of greed betrayal, and treason. All of the above in the eyes of the people. So tax collectors had lots of money, but zero respect. They were hated. If any of you watched The Chosen at all, you know they try to show this with how they portray Matthew. Matthew in The Chosen, the tax collector, very well off, very rich, hated. A pariah. You don't want to be seen in public with him. That was the life of a tax collector. So that's what we know about Zacchaeus. He's a chief tax collector, which means he's got lots of money. He's high up in the tax collecting organization, and he's rich, which means he makes lots of money doing it. And the implication is maybe not always on the up and up. And Jesus is coming to town in Jericho, and Zacchaeus wants to see him, and Zacchaeus knows no one is going to say, "Oh, sir, please have my spot," because he's a tax collector, and people hate him. And he can't see him if he stands in the back because he's short. Story of my life, right? Short people problems. So Zacchaeus has to figure something else out. He climbs the tree to see Jesus. And Jesus is walking along, and he stops, and he sees Zacchaeus in the tree, and he calls him by name. This is one of those moments where, Jesus just knows the person, knows who they are. He calls him by name and says, "Zacchaeus, get down. I'm having dinner at your house. I'm going to your house." And Zacchaeus was happy to receive him. But the people grumble. Now, here's something about this interaction. There's no way. Jesus sounds a little pushy in the story, right? He just says, "I'm coming over your house today." Now, I know I've been a part of enough Thanksgiving dinners with my mother and with my wife to know that you do not invite a crowd of people over to someone's house without giving them a heads up, right? And Jesus inviting himself over to Zacchaeus' house may not be, seem like the most gracious thing to do to a host, but understanding the situation, there was no way that Zacchaeus would ever invite Jesus. Not because he didn't want to, but just the way the world worked in Zacchaeus' time. You did not invite a holy person over your house if you were a tax collector because they would never be seen with you. This wasn't going to happen. So the only way this encounter was going to happen was if Jesus invites himself over Zacchaeus' house, which he does. So Zacchaeus is thrilled. And so he comes down, and the people are all upset, and they grumble. And Zacchaeus says, before Jesus says a word, Zacchaeus says, "Lord, look, I'll give half of what I have to the poor, and if I've cheated or robbed anyone, I'll give it back 4 times. Now, this is a pretty remarkable moment for Zacchaeus because everything we know about Zacchaeus from that short little bio that the gospel gives us, he was a chief tax collector and he was rich. Tells us that every choice Zacchaeus made in his professional life was to put money over people, money over community, money over his Jewishness, right? Money over all of it. That's what that tells us. But in that moment, when he has this encounter with Jesus, suddenly money doesn't seem to have the hold over him that it did. That one moment, and it frees Zacchaeus' heart from his love of money, and he's willing to let go of it. And when Jesus sees that he's willing to let go of the love of money, Jesus says, "Today, Zacchaeus, salvation's come to your house. For he is the son of Abraham too, and I came to seek and save the lost." So a fantastic story of the incredible love and mercy of Jesus and how he changes lives then and now. 2 things I want to bring it forward to us today, bring this story forward. The first is, it is a great reminder for us, not only as individuals, but as a church, that rarely do we come to Jesus with all our stuff together. Right? Rarely has there ever been a Sunday morning when I am perfectly ready for church. There's probably never been a Sunday morning. Rarely is probably too strong. There's probably never been a Sunday morning when I am feeling everything's right. Right? And maybe you feel that way too. Right? We've always got something going on. There's always something in our heart maybe that isn't right. There's always something weighing on us, a fear and anxiety that we're carrying that we know we shouldn't, but we just can't help it. Rarely is there a day when we're perfectly right to meet Jesus, but it didn't matter in this story because it wasn't Zacchaeus getting himself ready that got him right. It was Jesus seeing him. Zacchaeus making the effort and Jesus seeing him. Right? It's meeting Jesus that helps get us right. We don't come to him right. It's meeting Jesus that helps get us right. And so a lot of times we come to him in various stages of being a mess. Sometimes we're just a little bit of a mess. Sometimes we're a lot of mess. And I can say the exact same for me. There are days I'm both. Right? But that doesn't matter because it's coming to Jesus that cleans up the mess. It's not we have to clean up the mess before we come to Jesus. So we see that in the story. That's just a helpful reminder for us if we ever feel like my heart's not in the right place for this or my mind's not in the right place for this. It's not that we have to have our willpower get ourselves right. It's coming to Jesus that starts the process of getting us right. And we should have that grace and understanding for others too. Right? We're going to be sitting in church, not today, not any of you, but there are going to be times when we're going to be sitting in church and we're going to know somebody sitting near us is a mess. Because we know them and we know their life and we're going to be thinking, what are you doing here? You're a mess. Right? But that's why. Right? Because when we're a mess, it's meeting Jesus that gets us right. It's not getting ourselves together before we come meet Jesus. So one, that's good news for us, but it's also a cause for compassion and understanding for the people around us. The second thing, which is really, I think, a cool thing about this story, is the power of just seeing people. You know, Jesus is walking down the road, and how many times did Jesus walk down a road? Thousands, tens of thousands, right? Jesus is surrounded by people. How many times is Jesus surrounded by crowds of people? Thousands? But in this moment, right, he stops and he looks in the tree and he sees Zacchaeus and he looks in his eyes and he says his name. He says, Zacchaeus, come down. And that was life-changing for Zacchaeus. There was no healing. There was no blind person's eyes being opened. There was no dead person being raised. It was Jesus stopped, saw him, and said his name. He saw him. And it's amazing what it could mean for the people around us when we see them. Right? Just like Jesus, right? How many times do we do our weekly routines? Do we go to work? Do we go to HEB? Do we do the things we do with thousands of people around us that are invisible? Right? But once in a while, God might open our eyes that we see someone. Maybe you've had this experience, right? The power of just seeing someone, looking in their eyes and calling them by name, and how much that can mean to a person. This is not go out and do miracles. This is just notice and see someone around you. I remember when I was in seminary years ago, they make the seminarians are always the lowest person on the totem pole, so they made us do the kitchen work, the dishes. We would wash the dishes. So there'd be this great, big dinner that we would have, and bishops and priests would come from around the country, and of course, that would be a great time for us to network because we need jobs and all those things, but no, we had to wash dishes so the other people could go eat and enjoy themselves, right? Because we were the low people on the totem pole. Right? And we would make it fun and we would have a good time. It would never, we learned to enjoy it, but that was just our role when we were there. We were the labor. Well, I can't remember how many times we did that or how many countless people would eat and drink and have a good time at those dinners and what kind of things got done or what kind of church business was done during those dinners. I couldn't tell you any of that. What I can tell you is there was one bishop who would make it a point after he ate to get up and leave the important conversations and head to the kitchen and come and say, hi, what's your name? John? Thank you so much for cleaning the dishes tonight, John. And he would go around to every person in the kitchen and do that. There were probably 1,000 people at those dinners, that I washed dishes for randomly. I remember one, the one who saw me. Right? That stayed with me 15 years later. And there'll be times when, and I'm not great at this, but there'll be times when I say, that's the type of priest I want to be. I want to see people that serve. you never realize the power of seeing someone. So in your week this week, there's going to be 1,000 people moving around you, most of them invisible, like they are, because we're just in our routines, like Jesus was walking a road, surrounded by people who wanted to see him, like every day of Jesus' life was like, but this day he stopped and he saw Zacchaeus and it changed his life. So I just want to encourage you, one way we can be like Jesus, this story might inspire us to be like Jesus, is just don't forget the power of seeing someone. Just stopping, looking in their eye and saying, thank you so-and-so for this, or hello so-and-so, I appreciate that you're here. But don't underestimate how much of an effect you seeing someone can have on them. And that's one way, an easy way we can be like Jesus. We might not be able to open the eyes of the blind, we might not be able to raise the dead, but all of us can see someone and recognize them. And who knows what effect that might have on them. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.